Hi, my name's Shiloh. They said it was just a small ask, a little gift from the trust my grandfather left me. But somehow, that gift became an expectation, then a demand. And when I didn't give in, they erased me. From the speeches, from the photos, even from the guest list. They called it family unity. But what do you call it when your parents sign off on forged documents and your sister gives your money to her fiancé before the wedding even starts? What would you do if your silence was the only thing keeping their version of the truth alive? Would you stay quiet or finally press play? It started with a laugh. A soft one, the kind that floats over roasted chicken and red wine. The kind you're expected to join in on whether or not the joke is at your expense. I laughed too. Not because it was funny, but because I've learned over the years that silence, in this house, often sounds like rebellion. And tonight, of all nights, I wasn't ready to be the rebel. Marjorie sat across from me, all teeth and pearls, fingers laced delicately over her fiancé's hand. Eldon, always sharp in appearance but dull behind the eyes, grinned like he'd just won a prize. And maybe he had. After all, he was marrying the favorite, the golden child, the one they never questioned, never challenged. Dinner was at my parents' place, Asheville, warm evening, the kind of North Carolina spring that makes the air feel forgiving. But nothing about this dinner was easy. So, Marjorie dragged the word out, swirling her wine. You're not using it, right? I mean, it's just sitting there. I didn't answer right away. I knew what she meant. We all did. She kept going. The trust, I mean. Grandpa's gift. Just a little bit. For the wedding. Not the whole thing. The room was silent for a half-beat too long, before Dolores, our mother, jumped in. Marjorie didn't mean anything by it, honey. Just thinking aloud, that's all. I smiled. Small. The kind of smile that says, I'm not angry, but I'm not agreeing either. Lowell, my father, cleared his throat. It'd be a nice gesture, for family. That word again. Family. Like it was a shield they could all hide behind while nudging me to hand over the only thing Grandpa ever left just for me. The money wasn't life-changing, not by most people's standards, but it was mine. Mine because I earned his respect when no one else did. When everyone else was too busy or too tired, I was the one reading to him in that hospital bed, spoon-feeding him when his hands couldn't hold a cup. But to them, it was just there, just waiting to be reallocated. Eldon chimed in, smiling as if the whole thing were casual. We wouldn't even need much, just a portion. Think of it like a blessing. I chewed slower, set my fork down, and took a sip of water to cool the flame crawling up my neck. No one outright asked me. That's how they do things. They imply, nudge, create the atmosphere, then look surprised when you don't pick up on their hints. After dessert, apple pie I baked because no one else thought to bring anything, I stayed a little longer, helped clear the plates, laughed when someone made a half-hearted joke about Eldon needing a prenup, hugged everyone goodbye, but something inside me had already shifted. A few days later, I got the rehearsal dinner itinerary in the mail. A pretty little envelope with embossed calligraphy and floral trim. I opened it slowly, not sure why my gut had tightened the moment I saw my name. Except, it wasn't my name. Shayla was assigned to a table labeled Volunteer Coordination and Event Staff. No +1, no dietary notes, no seating near family. Marjorie's old college roommates were seated near the stage. Even our second cousin's toddler had a better spot. I read the card 3 times. Checked the email for the seating chart. It wasn't just a typo, it was a category. When people can't say what they mean, they spell it instead. I thought back to that dinner. How they laughed, how they looked at each other when I hesitated. It hadn't been a conversation. It had been a transaction in progress, and I'd failed to sign on the dotted line. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, the card still in my hand. The air was still and silent, broken only by the soft creak of the floor under my foot as I stood. In my car, I pulled out the old leather-bound notebook I kept in the glove box. the one I used when my head was too loud to sleep. I flipped to the first clean page and wrote one sentence. Timeline of requests. They thought I'd forget, that I'd let it go. But not this time. I didn't plan to show up that Sunday, but when Mom left me a voicemail saying it was just a little brunch to go over last-minute wedding things, I knew better than to ignore it. If you skip one event, suddenly you're the selfish one, the ungrateful one, the one who always makes things harder than they have to be. So I went. The sun hadn't even fully warmed the porch steps when I pulled into their driveway. Fresh tulips lined the walkway, like everything was blooming right on schedule. Except me. I stood there for a moment outside the front door, listening to the muffled sound of clinking glasses and soft jazz spilling through the windows. Inside, the smell of citrus and maple syrup hit me like a wave of artificial sweetness. The table was a Pinterest dream. White cloth, pastel florals, handwritten place cards. Marjorie sat in her usual spot, already radiant before noon. Eldon looked bored but polished. Dad had his polite smile on. And Mom floated between seats, topping off mimosa glasses like a hostess in a Southern magazine spread. "Shiloh, there you are," she said with a tone that made it sound like I was 10 minutes late, even though I wasn't. "We were just saying how lovely this weather is for a garden ceremony." I smiled. Neutral. I took the only empty seat, next to the staircase, behind the decorative hydrangea that blocked half the table. Nobody asked how I was. Instead, Marjorie launched right in, eyes wide with that sugar-coated concern she wore so well. "So, I was thinking," she said, spooning fruit onto her plate like it was just a normal Sunday thought. "The trust. It's not like you can really touch it yet, right? Not unless it's for something important. And, well, a wedding is important." I didn't flinch. Just buttered my toast slowly. She went on. "I mean, it's not the whole thing. Just a little help. Eldon and I are trying to make this day magical for everyone, for the family." Dad chimed in without looking at me. "If I had what you have, and my sister was getting married, I'd do the right thing." Mom added gently, "Sweetheart, no one's pressuring you. But this is a once-in-a-lifetime moment for your sister. Would it really hurt to help?" That word again. Help. As if I hadn't spent most of my 20s helping this family in ways no one remembered. The pressure didn't come from what they said. It came from how they said it. Everyone speaking softly, smiling, lowering their voices like I was the one overreacting just by breathing heavier than normal. I folded my napkin into my lap. My fingers dug into the fabric. I didn't speak, not yet. Because if I did, it wouldn't come out peaceful. They shifted the conversation, but the air was still thick with what hadn't been said. I noticed how Marjorie leaned into Eldon like he was the safest place in the room. How Dad avoided my eyes. How Mom refilled my orange juice, even though I hadn't taken a sip. Eventually, as we were finishing the last bites of quiche, Eldon leaned toward me. His voice was low, controlled. "We could have just asked for a loan, you know," he said, "but I guess we hoped you'd step up." I turned my head and met his eyes. There was nothing warm in mine. "You hoped I'd break quietly," I said, voice steady. "Sorry to disappoint." Then I stood up. Not in a scene-making way, just enough to draw their attention as I tucked in my chair and walked out through the front door without another word. No one followed. Back at home, I moved through the kitchen in silence, set my keys on the counter, poured a glass of water, and let it sit there untouched. Then I powered up my laptop. The screen glowed soft against the dim afternoon light. I created a folder on my desktop, named it Inheritance Pressure, Docs. Inside it, I uploaded a photo of the seating card with my name misspelled. Next, I scanned the brunch menu. Mom had printed them herself. On the bottom corner, "With love from the whole family." I attached a copy of that too, for the file. Then I opened the notebook from my glove box, transcribed everything I could remember from brunch. Who said what, their tone, their phrasing, because the only thing more dangerous than being ignored is being underestimated. Later that week, I returned to my parents' house for what was supposed to be a casual coffee visit. Nothing formal. Just a few family friends passing through town, one of my aunts, and the usual kitchen chaos Marjorie thrived in. She had her hosting voice on, smooth, cheerful, and just theatrical enough to make strangers think we were the kind of family you envy. I stayed near the edge of the living room, perched on the arm of the couch with a mug in hand, quietly observing. I've always known how to make myself small in that house. Not invisible, just easily ignored. As the group eased into that familiar late afternoon lull, when caffeine fades and the real talk begins, Marjorie launched into one of her stories. I didn't look up at first, but then I heard it, my grandfather's name. Grandpa used to tell me I had his spirit, she said, smiling warmly. He always said I reminded him of his mother, strong, decisive, stubborn as all get out. Light chuckles rippled through the group. She leaned in, her voice softening. We both sat with him when he got really sick, you know. Stayed up with him some nights, even when he couldn't speak anymore. I didn't breathe. She went on, weaving her version of a bedside vigil neither she nor Eldon had attended for more than a few short visits. I was there every night for 2 months. 2 long, unraveling months. I knew which days the pain meds didn't work. I knew what kind of pudding he hated. I knew the sound of his breathing when he slept and when he pretended to. But in her version, I had vanished, not forgotten, just omitted. And no one corrected her. Not Dad, not Mom, not the aunt who knew better. They all just smiled, nodded, sipped their coffee. I stayed silent, not because I lacked words, but because I knew they wouldn't land. I'd learned that lesson years ago. Truth has no weight in a room full of rehearsed memories. So I drank the rest of my lukewarm coffee and excused myself to the hallway. I stood there a moment, pretending to scroll my phone just to reset. That's when I saw it. The living room photo wall had been rearranged. New frames, fresh prints. Front and center now hung a candid from Marjorie and Eldon's engagement party. It looked staged, like something from a lifestyle blog. Everyone beaming, champagne in hand, coordinated outfits. The picture that used to be there, the one from Grandpa's final birthday, where I stood next to him while he held my hand, was gone. I checked the rest of the frames, just to be sure. Maybe they'd moved it somewhere else. Maybe it was in a smaller spot, or upstairs. It wasn't. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at a wall that used to carry pieces of my history and now carried only their highlight reel. Later that evening, I drove home in silence. No music, just the hum of the road and the tension in my jaw. I didn't call anyone. I didn't cry. I just walked into my apartment, placed my bag on the counter, and opened my laptop. Created a new subfolder. Revision attempts, verbal and visual. I uploaded a screenshot from a video I'd saved. Me reading to Grandpa by his hospital bed. I still had it, tucked away in a forgotten USB drive. Then, I opened my wall calendar, flipped to the current month, and with a black pen, I wrote across the top margin. You can only be erased if you let them write the ending. The following morning, as I sipped coffee alone by my window, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Veda. Let me know when you're ready to talk legal lines. I stared at the screen for a long while. I wasn't ready. Not yet. But I was getting close. By the time Sunday rolled around, the air had shifted again. A text from Mom, short and clipped, read, "Stop by tonight. Quick dinner, just us." That was all. No emojis, no warmth, no hint of whether this was a casual invite or another carefully staged performance. I knew better than to assume. I left the studio just after 5. The kiln was still warm from the last firing, and the glaze hadn't fully set on a batch of bowls I'd promised for next weekend's market. But I closed up anyway, pulled on a clean jacket, and made the familiar drive across town. Every time I passed the corner gas station, I felt a pinch in my chest. That was where Grandpa used to buy me grape soda as a kid, always whispering, "Don't tell your mama." That sort of loyalty felt like folklore now. When I pulled into the driveway, it was already dusk. Porch lights glowed, casting long shadows across the brick steps. I walked up slowly, careful, like the air might shatter if I moved too fast. Inside, the living room lights were dim, and the table was already set. No food, no clinking dishes, just 4 chairs pulled neatly into place. My parents on one side, Marjorie and Eldon across from them. My seat sat alone at the head of the table. They didn't call it a meeting, but it was one. A staged production in 4 acts. No scripts, but every word felt rehearsed. "Shiloh!" Mom greeted me, soft as a cloud. "Glad you came." I sat without speaking. My palms rested flat on my thighs, grounding me. Dad started. "We've been thinking. It might help if we all cleared the air before the wedding. It's important to your sister that everyone's on the same page." Eldon nodded, offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nobody wants drama, especially not on the big day." Then Marjorie leaned forward. "We're just trying to do what's best for the family." That word again. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. She continued. "I know you feel protective of the trust, but it's not like it's doing anything right now. It's just sitting there while we're trying to build something." Dad followed up like he'd been cued. "If it were me in your shoes, I'd want to see my sister happy. This could really help set them up." And finally, Mom landed the finishing blow. "You've always been the steady one, the thoughtful one. This bitterness, it doesn't look good on you, sweetheart." Ah, there it was. The setup, the spin. "You've changed." That was the new narrative, that I was the difficult one, the one making this hard. Not them, not the pressure, not the slow erosion of boundaries. Just me, with my reluctance, my refusal, my resistance. I exhaled slowly, my fingers curling into the fabric of my jeans. "You think this is about money," I said, voice steady. "It's not." Eldon raised a brow. "Then what is it about?" I looked at each of them. My sister, so polished and righteous. My parents, clinging to comfort. Eldon, smug in his calculated distance. "This isn't a request," I said. "It's a campaign, and I'm not part of it." The room fell quiet. Not a stunned silence, just stalled. Like they hadn't planned for me to push back with actual words. Dad cleared his throat. "We're worried about your attitude lately. This isn't you." I tilted my head, letting the irony soak. "So now I'm the angry one," I said, half to myself. "After months of being cornered with a smile, now I'm the problem." No one corrected me. I reached into my coat pocket and set my phone on the table. Screen up, recording timer blinking. 14:27. They all looked at it. "I don't argue anymore," I said. "I document." Then I stood up, calm as I had entered. Mom started to say something, maybe to pull it back, maybe to soften what couldn't be softened anymore. But I was already walking. Back at my apartment, I didn't waste time. I plugged in my phone, saved the recording, backed it up to 2 folders, labeled it clearly, "Family Meeting, Unedited." Then I attached it to the folder on my desktop and opened the message thread with Veda. Her response came fast. "That's enough evidence to begin a freeze motion. Let's talk Monday." I typed back without hesitation. "Let them keep talking. I'm done listening." By the time the rehearsal day came, I wasn't walking in blind anymore. I had already braced myself for omissions, backhanded kindness, and that nauseating tone my family used whenever they needed something but didn't want to ask outright. Still, I didn't expect the full production. It was early. Dolores had asked me to be there ahead of the others, to help with setup. I arrived a few minutes before 9. The barn had been renovated with polished wood floors, exposed beams, and overpriced fairy lights strung like some Southern Living magazine fantasy. The smell of lemon polish and eucalyptus candles filled the space. I walked in carrying the extra crates of lanterns I'd picked up for her last week. Unpaid, unthanked, of course, and headed toward the stage where a clipboard sat waiting. The event coordinator was chatting with a florist, so I figured I'd glance over the printed program she'd left behind. It took 3 seconds for my stomach to tighten. There was a section titled Words of Gratitude. Beneath it, a list of names. Cousins I hadn't seen since my 20s. An old neighbor who used to bring banana bread during Christmas. The efficient. Even one of Marjorie's old professors. Not me. No mention of me at all. Not as a speaker, not as a contributor. Just airbrushed out of the narrative. Again. I flipped through the next page, seating chart. I was at table 9, next to vendors and support team. They were calling this a family event, but I was treated like the help. I caught Marjorie alone near the catering station 20 minutes later. She was adjusting the height of her veil, talking to herself in the mirror when I stepped up beside her. Was I left out by mistake? I asked, my voice as even as I could make it, or by design. She blinked, looked at me through the reflection, and didn't miss a beat. You've always hated speaking in front of people, haven't you? It wasn't a denial. It wasn't even a good lie. It was deflection, polished and delivered with a practiced smile. I paid for the lighting, I said quietly. And the backup generator. She turned to face me then, eyes wide like I'd just accused her of arson. Why are you bringing that up now? Because no one else would. I walked away without responding. There was nothing else to say. That evening, just after I'd showered and pulled on an old college sweatshirt, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was Lacey, my closest friend since high school. Someone who knew every version of me, from braces to breakdowns. Hey, her message began. Wanted to give you a heads up. Marjorie reached out. She asked if I could talk to you, said she's worried you're isolating and that she's really overwhelmed. Hope that's okay. There it was. Not just exclusion, replacement. They didn't want me to speak, but they wanted someone else to speak for me. Someone more palatable. Someone less likely to say no. I stared at the screen and let the message sit for several minutes before replying. Not okay, please don't let her use you like that. Lacey answered almost immediately. Didn't think it felt right. Just wanted to be transparent. I thanked her, tucked the phone aside, and turned back to my laptop. Then I wrote a short message to Marjorie. If you have something to say to me, say it yourself. Leave my friends out of it. I copied the same to Dolores for good measure. I knew they had a pattern. When I went quiet, they whispered behind my back. When I spoke up, they pretended I was unstable. 10 minutes later, I emailed the event coordinator with one clear instruction. Remove the thank you segment from the final script. If not, I'll call the lighting company and cancel my contributions. It was the most polite threat I'd ever written. She responded. Understood. That night, I went into my bedroom, opened the drawer in my nightstand, and pulled out a small USB drive I hadn't touched in years. On it was a video Grandpa had recorded for me on my 23rd birthday. Just 30 seconds long. Him, sitting on the porch in his Sunday shirt, saying what he always said when things got hard. Don't bend yourself into silence just to make them comfortable. You weren't made to be quiet. I renamed the file Last Word. Then I saved a copy to a second drive and placed it inside a small padded envelope. Back on my laptop, I opened the legal folder and saw Veda's message waiting. I can escalate the freeze next week, but I need your full go-ahead. I didn't hesitate this time. Do it, I typed back. They thought leaving me out would keep me soft. They were still dealing with the version of me who apologized just for having boundaries. The next day came without drama. The sky held a flat gray stillness, and for once, I appreciated the lack of color. I spent the early part of the afternoon cleaning the apartment, repotting a plant I'd nearly let die 2 months ago. It felt good to care for something quiet, something that didn't smile while slowly cutting you out. Around 3:42 p.m., my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. No missed call, just the message. Good afternoon, this is Kim from First Carolina Bank's Fraud Detection Department. We noticed a high-value authorization initiated from a third-party account linked to your trust. If this request wasn't made by you, please return our call at your earliest convenience. I stood there with my hands still wet from watering the ivy on my windowsill. I dried them on my sweatshirt, replayed the message twice, then tapped Veda's contact. She picked up on the second ring. "I just got a call," I said, voice even. "Something's in motion." Without missing a beat, she replied, "Hold tight. Don't respond to the bank yet. Let me dig first." I opened my laptop, pulled up the document folder, and added the timestamp and message transcript. It wasn't about being paranoid anymore. It was about being ready. Less than 40 minutes later, my phone rang again. "Veda. They submitted a forged power of attorney," she said. "Scanned signature, poorly done. But the names attached?" She paused. "Dolores, Lowell, and your sister's fiancé, acting as their legal rep." I swallowed hard, not out of shock, out of certainty. I had expected manipulation. I hadn't expected them to drag a pen through my life and sign my name without flinching. "They said it was to consolidate assets for the family," Veda continued, "to prepare things for post-wedding investments. Their words, not mine." "Let's move," I said. "Whatever we have to do." She didn't waste time. By that evening, a cease and desist had been sent to the bank, Eldon and my parents. A formal freeze request was underway. She even looped in the original estate lawyer Grandpa had used, an older man named Thompson, who still remembered my name when she called. "This isn't a family disagreement anymore, Shiloh," she said. "This is clear legal overreach and fraud." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I know." After hanging up, I didn't sit down. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I printed 2 sheets, one with my actual signature from a notarized lease, the other with the forged one pulled from the bank's copy. I circled the inconsistencies in red and slipped both into a slim folder. Then I drove. I didn't call ahead. I didn't want them prepared. By the time I parked in front of their house, it was already dark. The porch lights were on. The house looked soft, welcoming, as if it hadn't been the source of a growing bruise on my life. Lowell answered the door. "Shiloh," he said, clearly surprised. "We weren't expecting—" "I won't be long." He stepped aside. Dolores sat in the living room, flipping through a bridal magazine. She didn't look up. I stood in the doorway and opened the folder. "This is your last warning," I said. "This," I held up the page with the forgery, "is a felony. I don't care how much you think you're owed, or what you think Grandpa would have wanted. He left that trust to me. Period." Dolores glanced over, but said nothing. Lowell's voice was quiet. "We were trying to help her start her future." "You mean by stealing from mine?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I laid the photocopies on the coffee table and pointed to the forged signature. "I asked for distance. You broke into my life with a pen." I looked at both of them. "The next paper you get won't be from me. It'll be from a judge." No one stopped me as I turned and walked out. Back home, I updated the folder on my desktop. Renamed the latest document chain, Stage 2, Initiated. Then I emailed Veda 2 words. Green light. 10 minutes later, her reply pinged back. "Asset freeze is in process. Let's see how united they are when the money's out of reach." For the first time in weeks, I shut my laptop and didn't double-check the locks on my door. They wanted my silence more than they wanted my support. Now, they'd get neither. The next evening, I arrived at the rehearsal dinner 15 minutes early, just as Dolores had requested. The venue had been transformed. Soft lights strung across rafters, flickering candles on every table, and the air thick with expensive floral arrangements and polite expectations. I walked in through the side entrance, past a few catering staff and vendors setting up. My eyes scanned for a familiar face, but all I saw were polished people in pastel clothing and forced cheer. One of the event staff greeted me by the name tag table. "Ah, here," she said, flipping through cards. "You're Sheila, right? Volunteer coordinator?" I looked down. My name, again, spelled wrong. And not just wrong, rewritten into a role I never accepted. The corner of the card had a little yellow dot, which, I assumed, corresponded with the seating chart on the easel next to the entryway. Table 11, back corner. just outside the path to the restroom. I didn't react, not outwardly. Instead, I took the card with a nod and walked toward the coordinator. I didn't volunteer for this, I said, and I certainly didn't agree to be categorized as support staff. She hesitated. Oh, I was told by the family that you'd prefer to stay low-key, less attention. I turned toward Dolores, who stood arranging champagne flutes across the head table, utterly unbothered. She caught my glance and offered a smile that said everything and nothing at once. You've always said you don't like being in the spotlight, she called gently, like she was doing me a favor. There it was. The script, the rewrite. I'd been edited out of the center and placed where they didn't have to look at me. I sat at my assigned table, surrounded by folded chairs and distant relatives of the caterer. The only sound was the occasional flush from the nearby restroom and the clinking of silverware being laid out. Midway through dinner, a woman I barely recognized leaned over, wineglass in hand. Your sister's so lucky, she said with that tight-lipped smile people wear when they're not quite sure if they're complimenting you or reminding you of your place. Getting married, finally settling down. And you? Still doing your art thing, right? Still. As if what I'd built didn't count. As if not attaching myself to a man meant I was floating untethered, while Marjorie's diamond ring somehow anchored her to virtue. I nodded, sipped my water, and didn't offer anything back. I'd learned that not every insult came with sharp edges. Some arrived dressed like concern and left bruises anyway. After the meal, Eldon stood to give a toast. He tapped his glass with his fork and began. Family is everything, he said, and in every family there are sacrifices. People who know when to give, not just hold. Who understand that unity means stepping aside when someone else needs the space. I felt the air shift. Eyes turned. Not all, but enough. A few subtle glances toward my corner table, the one next to the restroom. I stood up before he finished, walked out through the kitchen, past the dishwashers, and into the cool night air. There was no anger anymore, just a cold clarity. This wasn't my event. It never had been. I was here because they needed a witness, not a participant. By the time I got home, the sky had darkened and my phone had 2 missed calls from unknown numbers. I ignored them. I sat on the edge of my bed, slipped off my shoes, and pulled out the USB drive labeled Last Word. I'd kept it safe for years. Now it was ready. I called the technician at the venue. He answered with a casual, "Hey, yeah? Can I make a last-minute addition to the AV loop?" I asked. "Sure," he said, slightly confused, "as long as I get it tonight." I attached the file and sent it. No note, no context. It would play when they least expected it. Just 30 seconds. Grandpa's voice, his words, his eyes locked into the camera, saying exactly what needed to be said. Back in my room, I changed into a sweatshirt, closed my laptop, and glanced at my phone once more. A message from Veda lit up the screen. "Everything locked. They can't access a cent." My response came without hesitation. "Perfect. Now I'll deal with their other currency, attention." That night, I went to sleep with my phone face down and the curtains drawn. I didn't need more light. I didn't want more noise. All I needed was a few hours of quiet before the final act. And maybe, for the first time in a long while, I actually slept. By the time morning rolled in, Asheville was foggy, the kind of dense mist that muffled everything, the air, the sounds, even your thoughts. I woke to a vibration on the nightstand, a bank notification. Transfer of $60,000 initiated. I sat up fast, staring at the screen. The asset freeze hadn't cleared through the court yet. They'd found a window. Eldon had slipped something past, probably filed before the paperwork finalized, probably thought I wouldn't catch it until it was too late. I called Veda immediately. She answered before the first ring ended. "I know," she said, calm. "I saw it come through. Emergency injunction is already filed. I flagged it with the trust's legal counsel. We'll reverse it. Let them celebrate this last grab. It'll be short-lived." She sounded colder than usual, focused, like this wasn't just law anymore, it was personal. I let her handle the damage control. My attention was on something else now. By early afternoon, the wedding had begun. I didn't wear anything flashy, just gray slacks and a black blouse. No makeup, no heels, no pretending to play a part I wasn't written into. The venue was buzzing by the time I arrived. I moved through the entrance without drawing attention, past staff adjusting chairs and checking floral placements. The AV technician spotted me and gave a small thumbs up. "Cued. Slide 42, he whispered. "It'll auto-run with the montage. You sure you want no intro slide?" I nodded once. Just let it speak. I found a seat in the back, far from the head table. I wasn't here to pose for pictures or play nice with people who hadn't spoken to me in a decade. I was here for closure, my own kind. The reception moved along with precision. Champagne poured on time, speeches sprinkled between courses. Marjorie looked perfect in her dress, smiling as if the last 3 months had been smooth sailing. Eldon clung to her side like a campaign manager next to his candidate. Then came the family montage. The lights dimmed, soft music swelled, baby pictures, school plays, vacations I hadn't been invited on, birthdays I remembered differently than how they were framed on screen. Slide 39, then 40, then Grandpa. Not the man they painted in their stories, but him, frail, clear-eyed, seated on the edge of his hospital bed in that striped cotton robe. He looked straight into the camera. "If you're watching this," he began, "someone's tried to take what I left for Shiloh. I want to be clear. This gift, this trust, was hers. Because she was there when it mattered. Because she never asked for anything." He paused. "Don't let them rewrite the truth. It was always hers." The screen faded to black. No applause, no laughter, just silence. Dense, crushing. I didn't smile. I didn't look around. I stood up, heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. I walked straight out through the side door. Dolores called after me faintly, but I didn't turn. Lowell mumbled something I couldn't hear over the hush. Eldon followed me out into the night air. "That wasn't necessary," he snapped, voice sharp. "You humiliated her." I turned to face him. Calm. Cold. She earned it. I just pressed play. Back at my apartment, I changed into something soft and clean. I didn't bother hanging my clothes. I didn't text anyone. Instead, I wrote one last message to the estate attorney Grandpa had trusted most. Subject line: full asset protection. No family access. Body: make it final. No anger, no flourish. Just the line I'd drawn. Then I opened the family group chat, scrolled through the years of photos, jokes, passive-aggressive recipes, and holiday plans, and deleted it. Blocked Eldon. Saved the video to a secondary drive. Labeled it proof, not for revenge, but for clarity. And just like that, it was over. I didn't destroy their wedding. I simply refused to perform in it. 2 weeks passed. The silence was the first thing I noticed. No photos on social media. No wedding videos posted. No hashtags in celebration. Marjorie and Eldon, the couple who documented every brunch and boutique candle, suddenly fell off the grid. I wasn't surprised. Reputation, for them, had always been a carefully edited storyline. When the narrative cracked, so did their need for an audience. Word traveled through the extended family like smoke. Visible, but no one dared admit they smelled it. Cousin Dana mentioned at Sunday church that something awkward had happened at the reception. Aunt Lillian whispered to a neighbor that Marjorie had been sabotaged by someone jealous. No one mentioned me directly, but I knew, the kind of knowing that doesn't need confirmation. I kept to myself, didn't respond to voicemails, let emails go unread. I didn't block anyone else, but I stopped offering answers. Let them sit with the questions they never asked out loud. That Friday, a courier arrived at my parents' house with a sealed manila envelope. It was thick, heavy with intention. Inside, they found three things. The first, a certified printout from the trust's legal custodian, clearly detailing the irrevocable freeze and final reassignment. My name. No co-signers, no exceptions. The second, a personal check for exactly $1, made out to Marjorie. And the third, a note, handwritten in black ink on plain white stationery. This is the last time anything with my name goes toward your happiness. Dolores didn't read it out loud. Lowell didn't comment. Marjorie, according to what I later heard from a mutual friend, tore the check in half immediately, but didn't throw away the envelope. I imagined it sitting in a drawer now. Stiff paper, sharp corners, something that wouldn't let her forget. Meanwhile, I cleaned out my apartment. Not for a move, but for a reset. I boxed up old studio supplies I hadn't used since last winter, organized shelves, deleted files I no longer needed, reclaimed space. That weekend, I walked by Grandpa's old bakery. The sign had been taken down years ago, replaced by a cafe that never seemed to last longer than a season. But the building remained, quiet and sun-washed, with the same tile floor we used to mop together when I was 12. I pushed the door open. The new owner, a young guy named Jordan, greeted me from behind the counter. "I'm just looking," I said, stepping into the space like it still belonged to me. In some small way, it did. Before leaving, I handed him a flyer. Simple print, black and white. Coming soon, small batch ceramics by Shiloh. No flourish, no logo, just a new beginning. Later that night, I sat by my window watering a pothos plant that had once drooped from neglect. It was vibrant now, green, steady, like something that didn't need permission to survive. My phone buzzed. An old voicemail from Grandpa still lived in my saved folder. I hadn't listened to it since the night he passed, but somehow my thumb hovered over it now. His voice came through, soft, raspy, unmistakably him. "Some people don't change, Shiloh. They just get better at being who they've always been. But you have the courage to choose." I smiled. Then I deleted it. Not because it hurt, but because I didn't need to carry it anymore to remember who I was. The following week, at a cousin's birthday party, the family gathered at a long wooden table under string lights. The air buzzed with soft laughter and the clinking of forks on plates. Stories were told. Toasts made. At the end of the table, one seat was left empty. Not because someone forgot, not because of a late RSVP, but because everyone knew who it was for. No one mentioned my name, but nobody sat there either. And in that silence, I found a peace more honest than any apology they could offer. Some endings don't come with closure. They come with clarity. And I was finally free. Looking back, I didn't just walk away from my family. I walked toward myself. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight aren't loud. They happen in kitchens, in silence, in the spaces where we're expected to stay quiet for the sake of peace. But peace without respect isn't peace at all. It's surrender. I learned that protecting your boundaries doesn't make you cruel. Saying no doesn't make you unloving. And walking away doesn't make you weak. It means you finally chose you. Maybe you've been the invisible one. The one expected to give, stay calm, be reasonable. If this story found its way to you, maybe it's because your silence has gone on long enough. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been pushed into a role that wasn't yours, just to keep the family together? Do you believe family loyalty should have limits? Or is that too risky to say out loud? Let's talk about it. Share your thoughts in the comments. You don't have to agree with me. Just speak your truth. And if this story touched something in you, if you saw even a flicker of your own life in mine, leave a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. If you didn't like this video, that's okay too. I'd genuinely love to know why and where you're watching from, whether it's your kitchen, a quiet evening walk, or somewhere you're just trying to feel less alone. And hey, if stories like this speak to you, if you want more honest, unfiltered tales about real people navigating real wounds and quiet victories, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I've got more stories to share. Some painful, some hopeful, all true. You being here? That already means something. Thank you for listening.